These are the most disturbing events in the World Cup. Let's get started. Hundreds of workers are dying for the 2022 World Cup. On our first event, let's look at one involving workers who we rarely think about. When a country is selected to host the World Cup, it already has all of the necessary stadiums, parking lots, and public transportation. However, several less developed countries have been granted the distinction provided they agree to complete all the infrastructure on schedule. That implies a massive, complex, almost decade-long construction project will begin. In most situations, there are no major issues. For example, just 2 employees died during the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. But then FIFA opted to grant Qatar 2022, a humanitarian tragedy ever since. Qatar is a virtual slave state for foreign labor. Workers labor in horrible circumstances, according to the BBC. They are underpaid, live in filthy dorms, and cannot leave the country without an exit visa granted by their employer. Then there are the long hours spent in almost unbearable heat. According to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the situation is so awful that Human Rights Watch has asked for new rules to protect individuals from being killed simply because of the blinding heat. Without a doubt, people are dying. By 2015, estimated worker fatalities from just 2 nations totaled more than 1,200. Some of this occurs in the stadiums, while others occur when constructing other infrastructure. But there is no question that if Qatar had not been given the tournament, many more people would be living today. Brazil had stadiums collapse. Brazil was more prepared for the World Cup than Qatar, but they still needed to construct several new stadiums for the 2014 event. And based on the amount of issues they experienced with them, the job was quite bad. According to the Columbus Dispatch, you can expect it to last when you invest $360 million in a stadium like Brazil did on a new one in Sao Paulo. However, a major disaster occurred just before it was scheduled to be completed in 2013. A crane toppled one day, causing a domino effect. A 500-ton metal structure became loose and slammed through several chairs. 2 individuals were killed, and another was seriously wounded, but things might have been far worse. The low death toll was only feasible because the tragedy happened at lunchtime, and if the massive metal had fallen during one of the stadium's 6 matches, it would have easily been the biggest World Cup catastrophe in history. Other stadiums have similar issues. Because it began to rain, a portion of one roof fell. Another stadium has been inundated. Workers were also killed during the building of at least 2 more. FIFA stated that worker safety was crucial, but they also pushed for stadium completion as soon as possible. Watching matches literally kills people. It's interesting how fans get into sports when most of them entail grown people chasing a ball around. And all around that tension, yelling, hopping about, and eating and drinking unhealthy foods and beverages may have major health consequences. Several studies have revealed that watching soccer may be fatal. According to the BBC, research conducted in 1998 discovered that hospital admissions for heart attacks spiked by 25% on the day of a particularly stressful England World Cup match versus Argentina. Several factors contributed to the game's tension. For one thing, it was a knockout match, so whoever lost was out. When the game finished in a draw, it headed to a penalty shootout. The strain on the players is immense, and it is reflected in the audience if many collapse holding their chests. Meanwhile, according to Unexamined Medicine, Germans determined precisely how awful your chances of suffering an acute coronary attack are while watching a tense soccer match. Luis Suarez handball vs Ghana 2010. Of course, no discussion of football controversies would be complete without mentioning Luis Suarez. Ghana faced Uruguay in the 2010 World Cup quarterfinals for a chance to face the Netherlands in the semifinals. After a tense 1-1 tie in regular time, Ghana had a chance stopped off the line by Luis Suarez after extra time. The striker had clearly used his hands and was thus sent out, and Ghana was granted a penalty. Guion, the Ghanaian, failed to convert the penalty, and Uruguay went on to win the match on penalties. And what did Luis Suarez think about it? It was dubbed the tournament save, but haunting to the Ghanaian town. A team getting struck by lightning. If you thought you were unlucky or seen it all, think again. The majority of the globe takes soccer very seriously. Winning the World Cup is the greatest glory, but failing to qualify brings shame. When irate Colombian supporters shot and murdered Andres Escobar after he scored an own goal, the repercussions may be fatal. And things aren't likely to get much better if you play for a tyrant. According to NPR, the Koreans were defeated 2-0 in the first round against the Americans. Manager Kwang Min Kim, on the other hand, was certain that there was a perfectly acceptable explanation for their dismal performance. Lightning had lately struck half of his team. This allegedly occurred during a training session at home. Concussed players keep playing. In theory, soccer is a non-contact sport, but that isn't always the case. When people collide, sometimes horrific things happen, such as when an Irish player's leg was left hanging after a severe collision broke it during a World Cup qualifying tournament in 2017. Because players cannot use their hands or arms to contact the ball, they must rely on the rest of their bodies, including their heads. The issue arises when two persons go for the ball and slam their heads against each other. This has undoubtedly resulted in concussions, yet no one seemed to care. According to The Guardian, Canadian research indicated that care for brain injuries was nearly non-existent during the 2014 World Cup. 2/3 of players who had head injuries were not examined at all by medical staff, while the remaining players were evaluated briefly. They all continued playing. There was a discussion of altering the regulations somewhat to enable teams to better cope with head injuries, but FIFA decided against it just before the Russian World Cup. According to The Telegraph, their justification? They feared managers would misuse the change rather than utilize it to keep their players safe. The Battle of Nuremberg, 2006. You'd think the world was in for a treat with a match featuring the creative attacking abilities of Luis Figo, Robin van Persie, Wesley Sneijder, Cristiano Ronaldo, Deco, Rafael van der Vaart, and Arjen Robben. It was, but not in the manner that most people expected. While the game's solitary goal came in the 23rd minute, it was but a footnote in what became known as the Battle of Nuremberg. 4 red cards and 16 yellow cards were issued in a single match. God alone knows how many fouls were committed. It wasn't Santiago, but it wasn't a poor impression of it either. Surprisingly, for such a brutal game, this is the most recognizable game from the match. Please subscribe if you liked the video. There have been many more contentious moments in the World Cup. What do you think this World Cup has in store for us? Only time can tell us that. Did you know that Manchester denied Haaland before he could move to City? Please check the video in the top right corner to find out what happened. Please consider subscribing if you liked the video. We'll see you soon with another great video.